Accident with me.
That accident, that tore us apart.
That was horrible. That's when
The DELLS, like most groups from their time, have an interesting story. They had their share of breakups and shakeups, survived a brutal car crash that nearly ended it all, and even got booted from Ray Charles' tour just for being too good. Yeah, imagine getting fired for doing your job too well. And if that wasn't enough, their lead singer straight up quit to get a regular job, leaving the rest of the group at a crossroads. The setbacks, the real legacy, let's get into it. Just outside Chicago, in a little spot called Harvey, a group of guys got together at Thornton Township High, all bonded by one thing, music. 5 of them stuck it out, and that's how the DELLS came to be. It all started in the 50s with some dudes who just loved to sing. The crew? Mickey McGill, Chuck Barksdale, Vern Allison, Johnny Funches, and Marvin Jr. They called themselves the L Rays and were out here trying to make something happen. Singing? Not exactly their strong suit, but that didn't stop them. They hit up talent shows, belted it out at the local ice cream spot on Roby, even sang under a viaduct like it was their own stage.
We started bouncing around the neighborhood, going to these little parties, trying to sing, and they was booing us.
We couldn't sing a lick.
All that hustling had them itching to record, so they made their way to South Michigan Avenue, back when it was the go-to spot for making hits. Even Jerry Butler from The Impressions was in the mix. Their first record flopped, so they walked right across the street to VJ Records, run by Vivian Carter and Jimmy Bracken. First thing Vivian said, time for a new name. She had them toss ideas into a hat, looking for something short and eye-catching. The list had all kinds of random names. The Deals, the Bales, the Tails, but when she pulled the DELLS, that was it. But the real game changer was Oh What a Night. That song took off fast. Someone came in saying it was blowing up in New York, and they weren't lying. It was everywhere, playing in shops, blasting from windows. That track was their ticket straight to the Apollo.
Yeah, it was so big, man. You walk down the street, you hear this record all day long.
That's the one that got us to New York.
The Apollo Theater was the ultimate test. If you couldn't hold your own there, they'd send you home with a thanks for trying and no second chances. No warm-ups, no do-overs. You had to bring it the second you stepped on that stage. Making it there, that was everything. By the late 50s, the DELLS were really starting to make waves in the R&B scene, thanks to their killer harmonies and that smooth doo-wop sound. They'd already scored big with Oh What a Night, and everything was looking up. But just when it seemed like they were on their way, disaster hit, everything came crashing down, literally. The group got into a brutal car crash that put everything on pause.
That with me.
That accident, that tore us apart.
that was horrible. That's when
The group got into a brutal car accident on the Ohio Turnpike. Johnny Funches was behind the wheel when a tire blew, and things spiraled fast. Mickey McGill, the group's baritone, took the worst hit and ended up stuck in the hospital for half a year. His recovery was no joke. It was long, brutal, and tested him in every way. The whole situation rocked the group, and with McGill out of commission and everyone still processing the chaos, they decided to step back from music for a bit. That break eventually led to them pressing pause on the whole thing for a little bit. While McGill ended up in traction for months, the rest of the guys still showed up for a gig in Philly, but the group couldn't hold together after that.
When we got back, we just kind of disbanded, you know.
This was one of the worst recesses we could have had.
It took me years to get past that.
During this period, each member went in different directions. Tenor Johnny Carter left and ended up joining the Flamingos, another successful R&B group, while others took on various jobs outside of the music industry. It was a time of uncertainty, and for a while it seemed like the DELLS might not make a return at all. After some time apart, they found their way back to each other. Once McGill was back on his feet, they regrouped and switched things up, ditching the old-school doo-wop feel for a richer, more grown-up soul sound. They were ready to get back in the game, but their comeback didn't go exactly as planned. Not long after regrouping, lead singer Johnny Funches decided to step away, not because of drama or industry burnout, but to put his family first. He chose a steady life over the non-stop chaos of being on the road.
He stayed home to take care of his children. I thought that was quite admirable. We were kind of teed off out of it.
Losing their lead singer was a huge moment for them, but instead of calling it quits, they made a bold move. This switch-up also pushed them in a new musical direction, setting the stage for what was coming next. They needed a new member, and they knew exactly who to call: Johnny Carter, one of the original Flamingos. He had gotten drafted into the Army back in the day, but now he was back. When they heard he was hanging out at a local tavern, they didn't waste time. They literally pulled up, grabbed him, and told him they had something to talk about. The next day, they hit the road, had him sing a few notes, and that was it. He fit right in. Even better, he was the same size as Johnny Funches, had the same vocal range, and, well, his name was Johnny too. Before they knew it, they were on a plane to Philly, and that was that. They never looked back. After everything, the endless touring, that brutal car crash, and some time apart, the DELLS were back at it. With Johnny Carter officially on board, they hit the road with the Dinah Washington, and let's just say she was unforgettable.
Don't let me down, I have no time to waste.
Dinah wasn't just a legend, she was a whole experience. One minute, they liked her. The next, they couldn't stand her. She'd fire people like it was nothing. You're out, just like that. But the next day, why aren't you at rehearsal? You fired us? You've got 10 minutes to get in here. That's just how she was. She kept them on their toes, but they couldn't deny her talent. She didn't even need a band. Her voice alone could carry a whole song, flawless every time.
One was a tenor and was on.
The first name that we came up with was called the DELLS.
She was a lot, but honestly, it was all part of the lesson. She was tough, but she made them better. Vocally, professionally, everything. Dinah didn't just mentor them, she drilled them. 2 years under her wing felt like boot camp for the music business. Thanks to her and vocal coach Kirk Stewart, the DELLS weren't just a doo-wop group anymore. They could really do jazz. Most people don't realize that groups like theirs could switch it up like that. Instead of the usual setup with a lead singer and backup harmonies, they did full 5-part jazz arrangements. It wasn't just background vocals, it was a whole different way of singing, and they made it work.
You know, most people don't realize that the DELLS can sing jazz as well as they can sing.
Nobody saw that coming from them. One of their biggest jazz moments, a show where they straight up shocked the crowd. The 4 freshmen, total jazz purists, were in the audience, and after the show, they walked right up to the DELLS. Man, you guys are insane. Where'd you learn to sing jazz like that? These were guys who had studied at Juilliard, had the degrees, the whole thing. So when they asked the DELLS where they trained, the answer, Ice Cream Parlor, 147th and Roby Harvey. By the mid-60s, the DELLS had completely leveled up. Marvin Jr.'s deep, soulful tone mixed with Johnny Carter's sky-high falsetto turned them into a vocal dream team. Their performances had more energy, more soul, and, most importantly, left a lasting impression. After touring with Dinah Washington that year, they scored a prime gig opening for Ray Charles, the guy in music at the time. This was their shot to get in front of bigger crowds, and they weren't about to fumble it. Every night, they hit the stage with insane energy, pouring everything into their harmonies and leaving the audience completely stunned. Huge deal, right? Except, working with Ray wasn't exactly a chit-chat situation. The man had a whole system. If you've seen the movie, you know his road manager ran everything. Ray barely spoke to anyone. There was just one problem. They were too good. There was that Carnegie Hall show. The DELLS hit the stage and tore it up. 5 standing ovations. The crowd was losing it, but apparently they got too much love. The crowd was eating it up, and for an opening act, that's usually the dream. But when you're upstaging the main event before they even step out, yeah, that might not go over so well. Next thing they knew, Ray's road manager pulled them aside like, "So, when do y'all want to leave the tour?" By the next night, they were fired. They were shook. But fast forward a bit. When the DELLS started blowing up, not long after they got the boot from the tour, with no official explanation, I mean, everyone pretty much knew what was up. They had outshined Ray Charles, and no headliner wanted to be upstaged by their opener. Ray himself made sure to congratulate them. No hard feelings. They were at another crossroads. It could have been a setback, but instead they took it as proof of just how strong they had become. If anything, getting dropped only made their name bigger. And within a year, They came back swinging with a new version of Stay in My Corner, a track that put their signature deep soul and dramatic vocals front and center. They went on to drop hit after hit. A popular one would be There Is, written by Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller was behind another one of their biggest hits, the one that really sent their career into overdrive. And funny enough, they almost didn't redo it. Stay in My Corner made it onto the album for the most random reason. They just needed one more song. People loved that track, especially once Marvin started flexing with that long note. It wasn't even planned. They were still short on time, so he was like, all right, I'll just hold this note. And wow, did he commit.
He started traveling with us. He traveled with us for about 5 weeks to see just what was going on.
A Heart is a House for Love blew up thanks to the 5 heartbeats, but let's be real. The movie might as well have been called The 5 DELLS. That story? Pretty much theirs. And they didn't just hear about it secondhand. Robert Townsend rolled with them for weeks, taking notes, making sure he got it right. He kept about 80 to 85% of the movie straight from their real experiences. If it wasn't them, it was somebody they knew. Townsend talked to a lot of artists while making the movie. The Temptations, the OJs, plenty of legends. But there was just something about the DELLS. Maybe it was that Chicago connection. Maybe it was just real recognizing real. Either way, they clicked.
Everything in that movie either happened to us or happened to somebody.
Robert Townsend could have just called it the 5 DELLS, but he wanted to keep things fictional, keep folks from pointing fingers saying, oh, that's so-and-so's story. He was the first one to really step up and tell a story about a group like that, and the DELLS weren't mad at it. It was their story, most of it anyway, but maybe that's why they didn't rush to watch it. Some things hit too close to home. Even though The 5 Heartbeats was heavily inspired by the DELLS, the movie never outright gave them credit as the main influence. Yes, it pulled bits and pieces from different R&B groups, but a lot of the real-life wins and struggles in the story lined up with the DELLS' own journey. Fans and music buffs have gone back and forth for years on whether the DELLS ever got their due. The movie is definitely a tribute to old-school R&B, but some people feel like their influence should have been more openly acknowledged. Unlike straight-up biopics like The Temptations or The Jacksons, An American Dream, The 5 Heartbeats being marketed as fiction meant the DELLS' connection to it was never really front and center.
I wanted to create a fictitious group because I didn't want to say, hey, that's so-and-so in the movie. And
Robert Townsend has admitted that the DELLS played a huge part in shaping the film. They weren't just consultants. They helped the cast understand what it was really like to be in an R&B group and even lent their voices to the soundtrack. Their first-hand experience gave the film an extra layer of authenticity, showing both the glitz and the messiness of the music industry.
interviewed a lot of different, groups. Like I talked with the Temptations.
But since the movie never straight up credited them, a lot of people missed the connection. The 5 Heartbeats became a cult classic, introducing new audiences to the magic of 60s R&B, but the DELLS' role in bringing that story to life often went unnoticed. Still, the movie put a whole new audience onto the DELLS, and A Heart is a House for Love became a hit all over again. The DELLS, now known as the Mighty Mighty DELLS, never stopped. They were still out there, still pulling crowds, still getting love like it was the first time. Seeing people react like that? Unreal. And the legacy didn't stop with them. Their sons, Marvin Jr. and Vern Allison, stayed close. Marvin sometimes singing backup and even designing their outfits, while Vern was in the studio producing and playing drums. To them, it's an honor, keeping that history alive night after night.
You guys can sit down now, okay? I know you thought we were going to come out here limping, didn't you?
50-plus years, feeding families, still standing together. The DELLS weren't just a group, they were family, and nothing could break that. Even when they were out on the road, their kids stuck together like cousins. Because that's what it was, family. When the DELLS finally got their flowers at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it wasn't just about the music. It was about family. Standing on that stage, they made it clear. Next to God, their family was everything. And yeah, there were some tears. When their name was called, the whole room got up. That moment, pure pride. Johnny Carter had already been inducted with the Flamingos, but the DELLS had been waiting way too long, nearly a decade of nominations. Honestly, they should have been in there ages ago. The DELLS were the blueprint, and people still don't realize how much they shaped music, but maybe things worked out how they were supposed to. If they'd gotten all the recognition back then, who knows if they'd still be here today. And after all these years, they were still tight. Not perfect. Plenty of arguments, plenty of moments where they got on each other's nerves, but real family doesn't need to be perfect. Somehow, through it all, they stuck together. The DELLS stuck together longer than most marriages, so yeah, that's real close. Honestly, it feels like their whole journey was something straight out of fate. They couldn't have dodged it even if they tried. And one thing's for sure, they were always solid, always stood on business. 50 years in the game is no joke. They didn't just make music, they opened doors. Groups like the Whispers, the OJs, and so many others wouldn't be where they are without them, and half of those acts don't even realize who paved the way.